everybody. Welcome to the Township of Howell Planning Board meeting for Thursday, February 15th, 2024. Eileen, opening statement, please.
Thank you. Hold on one second. I hereby declare this meeting of the Howell Township Planning Board to be open. Adequate notice having been given pursuant to the New Jersey Open Public Meeting Act in the following manner. First, on January 5th, 2024, a copy of said notice was emailed to the Asbury Park Press and the Star Ledger. Second, on January 5th, 2024, a copy of said notice was hand-delivered to the clerk of the Township of Howell. Third, on January 5th, 2024, said notice was posted in the office of the Planning Board and on the bulletin board in the Howell Township Municipal Building, 4567 Route 9, Howell Township, New Jersey. In accordance with the Fire Prevention Code and your safety, please be advised that this facility is designed with 2 emergency exits, which are at the front and rear of the meeting room. Furthermore, smoking is not permitted in the municipal building. Please take note that this meeting is being videotaped for possible future broadcast on Howell Township TV 77. Thank you.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Cristiano?
Present.
Mr. Greenfield?
Yes.
Mr. Leggio?
Here.
Mr. Mercer?
Here.
Mr. Tannenhouse?
Yes.
Mr. Rebel?
Here.
Councilwoman Fisher has been excused. Ms. Pike has been excused. Mr. Carbonic?
Present.
Chairman Bavai has been excused. And Chairman Husser.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Would everybody please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and take a moment of silence for our men and women fighting abroad.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, before we go further,
Sure.
we need to swear Mr. Greenfield in because he was
right.
reappointed and hasn't been here since. So you can stand.
Sure.
Mr. Chair, I'm getting over a cold, so I just request that you read the oath.
Sure. I don't have a copy.
He has it. You could you could just read
Or
it.
you could just read it, Brian. Yeah.
I, Brian Greenfield, do solemnly swear or affirm that I will faithfully, impartially, and justly perform all the duties of the office of the Planning Board, Class 2 member to the best of my ability, and that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey, and that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same and to the governments established in the United States and in this state, under the authority of people, so help me God.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Congratulations.
Mr. Chairman, I want to just make a quick statement.
Sure, Brian.
Eileen, do we have more surfaces available?
What do you mean more surface?
These things? We do. Okay. I'd just like to, maybe some of the newer members may not be aware that if they'd like to have one to be able to look at their notes or the online documentation, they just got to let you know that they'd like to have one.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
All right, on to approval of minutes for regular meeting December 14th, 2023. Eligible voters, Cristiano, myself, Tannenhouse, and Mercer.
I'll make a motion to approve the regular meeting minutes December 14th, 2023.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you.
Mr. Cristiano?
Yes.
Mr. Mercer?
Yes.
Mr. Tannenhouse?
Yes.
And Chairman Husser?
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you.
All right, approval for the reorg and regular meeting dated January 4th, 2024. Eligible voters, Cristiano, myself, Mercer, Tannenhouse, Rebel, Carbonic, and that is it.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve regular meeting minutes January 4, 2024.
I'll second.
That was Chris. Mr. Cristiano?
Yes.
Mr. Mercer?
Yes.
Mr. Tannenhouse?
Yes.
Mr. Rebel?
Yes.
Mr. Carbonic?
Yes.
And Chairman Husser?
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you.
And the last is for the regular meeting dated January 18th, 2024. Eligible voters, Cristiano, myself, Leggio, Rebel, and Carbonic. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
That's Mr. Leggio
I'll second.
and Mr. Cristiano.
Thank you. Mr. Cristiano?
Yes.
Mr. Leggio?
Yes.
Mr. Rebel?
Yes.
Mr. Carbonic?
Yes.
And Chairman Husser?
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you. Any vouchers, Eileen?
I have no vouchers.
Any correspondence?
Yes, I have an email from Vincent Halloran. He is the attorney for case number SD 3009, Augustine Kim. He has asked that this application be carried to April 4th with no further notice, and he's granted the board an extension of time through May 1st, 2024.
Thank you. Ron, are you able to make the announcement?
There'll be no further notice to property owners.
No further notice to property owners on that one.
And then I also had an email from Michael Herbert. He is the attorney for case number SD 3013, which is Basadar LLC. They're the last application on the agenda, and they did not do their notice, so they need to be rescheduled with notice. So there's really no
announcement
has to be made.
necessary. Okay.
And that's all I have.
All right, thank you. Any resolutions?
No resolutions,
Any submission waivers?
no submission waivers.
All right. Applications before the board. First is case number SP 1035, Josh Van, 2 Clayton GV LLC, formerly known as Joseph Wilhelm, for an extension of time. Counselor.
Thank you. Good evening, members of the board. For the record, John Jackson on behalf of Josh Van. We are seeking an extension. This was granted in 2018. 2020, the Permit Extension Act told the period. My client's the contract purchaser, so we were asking for 3 one-year extensions. By my math, that would take us out to 2024. This would give him the confidence that he needs to close and then pursue this development. That's the reason for the delay. The property's changed hand a couple times. And as an aside, I researched it myself, and I looked with Mr. Matt Howard. A site plan doesn't expire anyway unless there's a zoning change. Mr. Howard confirmed that there's no zoning change when I made the inquiry to him. It was an informal confirmation. So this is really technical. It just gives my client the confidence that there is an extension in place in order to close on the property and change this non-conforming residential to a commercial office. Thank you.
And when does the extension last through 2024?
Well, the approval was granted, I believe, in May
10th,
of 2018. The Permit Extension Act went into effect in March of 2020. It ended March 9th, 2022. So we still had our initial 2 years when the permit extension went into effect. So March 2022, by my calculations, we would need the 3 one-year extensions. That would take us 23 March, 24, and 25.
25, okay.
So
Got
we
it.
could really just get 2 one-year extensions.
Got it. Anybody from the board have any questions? Laura, anything?
Sorry, nothing on this application,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
All right. Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make motion for approval of extension of time.
Mr. Cristiano,
A second.
Mr. Leggio. Roll.
Mr. Cristiano?
Yes.
Mr. Greenfield?
Yes.
Mr. Leggio?
Yes.
Mr. Mercer?
Yes.
Mr. Tannenhouse?
Yes.
Mr. Rebel?
Yes.
Mr. Carbonic?
Yes.
And Chairman Husser.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I hope all the other applications go as quick.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night now.
All right. Last application for the evening is case number SP 1115, Jabe Howell LLC. And this is for a preliminary and final major site plan with ancillary variance and design waiver relief.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman.
Good evening.
My name is Michael Butler from the law firm of Eckert Siemens, here on behalf of the applicant.
Mike, I don't think I've seen you in person in a long time. I
No,
just
no.
remember seeing your face on a Zoom call.
It's good. It's good to see, well, the full body version. So we're here tonight it's an application for preliminary and final site plan. The board took jurisdiction of this application at the December meeting and moved us to this meeting. The property in question is located at 402 Cranberry Road. It's block 182, lot 4. It's in the SED one special economic zone. Before I start, there were a bunch of reports. I just want to make sure I have everything correct. So I have a most recent letter from CME Associates, dated February 9th, 2024. I've got a letter from Mavakian Associates, February 14th, 2024. I have an updated letter from the Environmental Commission dated February 2nd, 2024. I have an updated, a letter from the Shade Tree Commission dated December 4th, 2024. I have a letter from the Monmouth County Board of Health dated February 5th, 2024. An updated letter from the Howell Fire Bureau dated February 13th, 2024. And a letter from the Farmers Advisory Committee dated December 24th, 2023. I don't think there are any other reports that I know of. Okay, perfect. Perfect, I got everything. Took me a while to print everything and stick it in the binder today, so I wanted to make sure I had everything. Okay, so as I said, this is a request for preliminary and final site plan for a property located at 402 Cranberry Road. It's designated as Block 182, Lot 4 on the Howell Township tax maps. What my client is asking for is for approval for a trade contractor's business. It's a conditional use, and my client will meet all the standards for the conditional use. We'll provide testimony to prove that. There are variances and a bunch of design waivers, and we'll go through all of that, those various reliefs during the testimony. Tonight I have 4 witnesses for you. Actually, I have 5 witnesses, but one's coming up twice, so we'll count it as 4. I have the applicant, representative of the applicant, Andrew Walsh. I have Patrick Ward. He is going to be our engineering expert. I have Amanda Lunudo, who is our architect. I have John Ray, who is our traffic expert, and then Patrick Ward's going to come back and give planning testimony. There's one little quirk with my presentation. I just want to tell you, ask you for your permission. Normally, I would have traffic testimony happen later on in the testimony, but my traffic expert, John Ray, has another event this evening. So what my plan was to put the applicant on first, so there's some foundation, and then Mr. Ray would come up and give his testimony, and if the board could ask questions and the public could ask questions.
Yeah, that's fine.
And then we can let him go with the remainder of his evening. Perfect. Okay. So then, if there are no questions of me, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the applicant up. We'll swear him in, and we'll start going.
Sounds good.
All right. Come on up.
You want to swear them all in at once?
You swear or affirm testimony you're about to give this board is the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
I do.
You state and spell your name for the record.
Andrew Walsh. You say spell as well? W-A-L-S-H.
Go ahead.
Okay. All right.
And that's a microphone on the table. Just make sure you speak into it so I catch you on the record, please.
Sure. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Perfect. Hi, Mr. Walsh. Can you just give the board some of your background and some of the background on your company?
Sure. So we started a water utility business about 2.5 years ago. We do water main installations and such stuff like that. We do a touch of sewer work as well. We actually do water work for New Jersey American Water in the town of Howell, and we do some sewer work for New Jersey American Water and Aqua as well in the town of Howell. When we started the business, it got going okay. We started looking for a property that suits our needs. We struck out a bunch, but we did find this property with the proper zoning, and that's how we ended up here. We are still a pretty small business. I would call us a mom and pop shop. It's pretty much just myself in the office. My mom comes in once a week to help me with bookkeeping, and we have about 15 guys out in the field.
Okay, so you're currently renting your location?
We rent, the problem right now is we rent in 3 different locations. So we have our office, we have a yard with our trucks and equipment, which are honestly mostly on jobs, which is how we're getting away with it. And Then we have a garage in a third location that has, we do specialty stuff as well, so insertion valves, line stops, and wet taps, such stuff like that.
Perfect. So you were looking for a space, a property, you've been looking for a while for a property where you can house your business in one location
In
rather
one
than
spot.
having it spread all over the place.
Correct, and it's a pretty central location to the areas we serve as well.
Okay, and so for this property, your business is the contract purchaser for this property. It's owned by George Harms Construction,
Correct,
and they've consented to this application.
correct.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about just how you propose to use the property. And while we're talking, I think that is, I'm not sure what's up on the screen. Is that a?
Phase 1 exhibit.
Okay, so I think that, just for the record, I believe that's a, hold on 1 minute, 19. Actually, can you put up 820? Okay. Can you talk a little bit about your proposed use for the property?
So if all goes well, we would only want phase 1. And the way I say that is if the company my company is doing well enough, we don't want to have to build that second building. Once we started doing, we're not developers, we don't know how this goes. Once we started going through this process, we realized if we're putting all this time and effort in, we might as well try to maximize the property, at least on the approval side a little bit, which is how we ended up with phase 2.
So maybe, Eileen, can you go back to, I'm sorry, can you just flip to the phase 1? So let's just talk generally about phase 1. That front building, that's the building where your contractor's business is actually going to be located.
Yeah, so the front of that building will be the office, and the rear of that building will be that garage I was talking about, which will house the tapping equipment to do insertion valves, wet taps, line stops, the fittings associated, valves associated with all that work.
Okay, perfect. And you said, you did touch on there's some office space in the front, and there was a question in one of the review memos about bathrooms and a kitchenette, and whether that was going to be shared, because the office space is in the front of the building, and the main use of the building where you're having your equipment and your trucks and whatnot, that's in the back of the building. But
The intent is for that to be shared, though.
Perfect.
The bathrooms in the kitchen. Yeah.
Okay. And there's no showroom that's proposed. You don't have clients that come in and look at your taps. I don't know what a tap is, but they don't come in and look at your taps.
No showroom, and I think
Okay.
we've had one guest in 2.5 years in business, so.
Okay. Can you take the board through what a typical day would look like for your operation?
Here or in general?
No, here.
It would mostly be myself in the office. Some guys would come in. We probably have one crew, maybe 2 crews at a time coming into the yard to get in their trucks, load up some fittings, pipe, whatever they're doing that day, and then head out to the job. The beauty of what we do, though, is we do a lot of water main install, and that means we have a satellite yard. Like, say we're running main in Jamesbury, we'll have a satellite yard in Jamesbury where they're set up, so they're not even coming to this location every day. And then in the office side, it would mostly just be me. Sometimes Keith Kaloji will be there. He's the majority owner of the utility business I'm talking about. And then if you come by on Wednesday afternoon, my mom will be there too.
I was just going to ask, when is she going to be there? What time typically would you be in the office, or would the crew be out there if they were there and not on a job site?
We come in between 6:30 and 7 usually.
Okay. And then what time generally would you be finishing up?
3:30 with no overtime. So sometime between 3:30 and 5, they'll be coming back to the yard.
Okay, and you said about on-site office, you're looking at yourself, the principal and maybe your mom, so that's 3 cars.
3 people. We have, we hope to grow a little bit, but not too much. So.
Okay. What type of trucks would be, or other vehicles would be out there on the site?
We have a box truck for each crew and a dump truck for each crew. Each dump truck usually has a trailer, whether or not they're trailing something that day. It depends on what they're doing that day. So with 3 crews, and the foremen have pickup trucks, but those pickup trucks go home with them, so 6 to 8 trucks right now.
Perfect. Now, do you expect any type of deliveries?
Rarely. Mostly the only deliveries we get are when we put an insertion valve in, we need to then replace that insertion valve. So it's a valve and a sleeve that would go in the shop.
Okay. What type of truck is that delivered on?
That's usually, depends where it's coming from, but it could be a box truck, it could be an 18-wheeler box truck.
Okay. Some of just generation of garbage. Does your business generate a lot of garbage or recycling?
Very little, I would say, relatively, since our clients buy most of the material and bring it right to the job site for us. We probably go through a dumpster a month at most.
Okay, perfect. Actually, I think you laughed at me when I asked about storage in the back. You said if I have to store something in the back, I'm losing money. You want everything to go to the job site most of the time. I think you may have said stupid lawyer. All right, so what do you envision being stored outside?
We stock clean stone and some DGA or RCA, there's different names for it, products like that in the back. We do have pipe on the ground, but right now we don't have any pipe on the ground, but every once in a while we will have some pipe on the ground when we wait for a job to get started, if the client asks us to store pipe until the job gets going. But ideally for us, we don't move it twice and we just get it delivered right to the job.
You don't plan on stacking pipes and having anything being taller than 10 feet?
No, OSHA only allows them to go 4 high anyway, so about 6 feet high.
Eileen, can you just scroll down a little bit on that? I'm sorry, up. I apologize.
It's Laura, not me.
Oh, Laura, sorry, Laura.
I was going to play Eileen.
I could throw things at you then. All right, a little bit further. I just want to show up on the top there. You've got a lighter gray area. Can you just explain what those are?
That's the area to store stone, DGA, and then another bin for sand if and when we need it.
And you use that for your repairs if you have to repair a road or something?
When we put water main in, you usually bed it with stone and then put DGA back in the trench.
Perfect. Okay. Now, you had said your main goal really is for the phase 1 to have it, and we came here asking for the phase 2 because if we can lock it in, we can lock it in. What happens if phase 2 never happens? Is the proposal just going to stay like that?
Ideally.
And when I say that, I apologize. What's up on the screen, which is A19, I believe.
Yeah, my thought is, and I hope I'm conveying this properly, if our business is doing well enough, we'll be happy with this setup. But we figured since we're going through the time and effort to come sit before you guys, we might as well get approved for something that might be, I don't know how to say this, like something that, I hate to say if our company doesn't work out, the property still has value elsewhere.
So, Mr. Chairman, I don't understand what that means.
I don't either.
And quite frankly, it may be best for them to focus on phase 1 if that's what they want. They're here seeking preliminary and final. I'm not, and this may be not be the correct witness, but I'm not hearing enough that's going to get to a preliminary and final on phase 2. I'm not even comfortable that if we're saying it's not affiliated with this business, then what it is, and whether or not we can have 2 principal uses on this site. So for those reasons, and I certainly defer to counsel, I know he has more witnesses, but I think the focus may need to be on phase 1 only.
Well, we were going to talk a little bit about phase 2 also. So the board had some comfort in what the phase 2 plan was, what the phase 2 plan is. But I wanted to also kind of get through the phase 1 so we can have all of that in before we start talking about the phase 2.
Excuse me, Andrew, are you saying you're worried if the company fails, you want there to be a higher use of the property, right? Like, it'll be valuable after the fact.
We're trying to maximize what you can do on the property.
Right, so that another company could come in and say, okay,
We could
I
bring
could
out-
use the whole thing.
Correct,
Are
exactly.
you saying that phase 2, that building will never be occupied by your company?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying, I guess there's two things, and I'm not explaining this well. And again, we're not developers, but we don't, ideally right now with the cost, we just want to build the front building, but we want to have the option to down the road build that second building.
Right.
But, so I think what we're all struggling with is that you're saying that second building will not be used for your business.
It could. Right now, I don't need that much space.
Right, so what we're saying is that back building is gonna be set up for a trade contractor's business. So it's either gonna be used by Mr. Walsh's company, or will be rented out, but it will be used as a trade contractor's business and will meet the requirements for the trade contractor's business.
Mr. Chairman, I'm still, and again, they can continue, but I'm still not understanding that. And it's a very big hypothetical. You know, we have a trade contractor business is a conditional use. So there are very specific conditions that they'd have to meet. I can understand the representation, but I don't feel comfortable, just so the board understands my sense, I don't feel comfortable that we have enough operational testimony as to what that phase 2 operation could be. I mean, to me, 5 minutes ago, it sounded like it could be a different user completely. In fairness to this applicant, I don't know that he has that information. So,
I would agree with Laura, especially because quite a few of the conditions associated with the use.
You gotta pull your microphone down, please.
Oh, sorry. I agree with Laura, especially because a number of the conditions associated with the use kind of talk about how, you know, the building is used and how the use lays out on the site. And if this is all hypothetical with an unknown tenant or end user, we don't really know what those conditions would look like in that second building.
So there will be testimony later about the layout of both buildings.
I don't think it's about the layout, I think it's about the use, so.
No, yeah, and I agree, and what Mr. Walsh is going to testify to is that back use will be a trade contractor's use.
Right, but I think what our professionals are trying to say is that although it will be a trade contractor use, it's a conditional use, and it's predicated upon what that trade contractor is actually doing. The board has no ability to know what that trade contractor is proposing to do with that conditional use.
So
to weigh that into the fact of whether we approve or not approve that, so.
So the trade contractor's use is specific in the code. So there are certain ways that the building has to be broken up as for what's office space and what's not office space. And there are specific uses, I believe, that qualify as trade contractor's uses. And the building that's proposed in the back meets all those criteria. And what the testimony will be is that we will, you know, that will be used as a trade contractor's business, that building, whether it's used by Mr. Walsh's company or whether it's rented out to a tenant. The intent and what we would be asking the board to approve would be a trade contractor's business based upon the criteria, meeting the criteria that is within the township code.
Laura, you need 5 minutes?
I just want to pull up the code because I don't even know that we allow multi-tenanted trade contractor businesses. And I'm concerned that we would then be introducing two principal uses.
Eileen, can we take a 5-minute recess on this?
Let the professionals look at it.
The board's going to take a 5-minute recess. We'll be back at 7:35. The planning board will now reconvene.
All right, Mike.
All right, sorry about that.
No, don't be sorry.
Okay, so what we were just talking about was the fact that the professionals were uncomfortable of the back building in phase 2 being multiple tenants. We understand that, and what we're willing to do is say we'll take the approval, so it's only can be this tenant, or not this tenant, this applicant. And if we were to come back and if there were to be other tenants, we'd have to come back and seek another approval.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's acceptable.
Sorry, that took a long time to get to that point.
all
I
right.
apologize. Makes sense. All right, so let's talk about the back building. The way the back building was set up was, and I know that you're not the professional, we're going to have the professionals come up. The way the back building was set up was to meet the criteria for the trade contractor's business.
Correct.
If you are to grow, hopefully you are to grow, you will use that back building as a trade contractor's business for your business.
Yes.
Okay. And generally, your business would be the same as what you said before. You have about 15 employees right now. Hopefully you grow. Your hours of operation are about 6:30 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. There are very little deliveries to your property. Hopefully they save money and deliver it to the site. And there's not a lot of trash or recycling pickup.
Correct.
Okay, perfect. I don't. Oops, sorry. Go ahead.
If we could just, and there's no proposed vehicle repairs
Oh, sure.
on the site?
No, I mean, if a truck breaks down, we gotta have it fixed, but we're not running a mechanic shop.
Got it.
Correct.
Okay.
Then you wouldn't be repairing trucks or vehicles or anything out in the site or equipment. I don't know what type of equipment you use,
No.
but, okay.
No.
I don't have any other further questions of this witness.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions? Seeing none. I know Mr. Ray is
Yes.
in a time pinch.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew.
You swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give this board is the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please state and spell your name.
John Ray, R-E-A.
All right, Mr. Ray, if you could provide the board with your qualifications.
I'm a traffic engineer. I'm a principal with McDonough and Ray Associates, 1431 Lakewood Road, Manasquan, New Jersey. I'm a licensed professional engineer. My field of specialty is traffic engineering. I have a total of 50 years' experience in the traffic engineering field now.
You're good. You're good to go.
And I've been here many
I know you
times before.
have.
I've been to the old building on Preventorium Road, a long time ago.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Ray, for tonight's hearing, you did prepare a report dated October 5th, 2023.
I did.
And just for the record, it was marked into the record as A17. Laura, you don't need to put it up because I'm sure this is much nicer to look at than a report. Could you just run through your report for the board and point out your conclusions?
Sure. We've made several site visits to the property to just establish the existing roadway and traffic conditions in the area. We conducted peak hour traffic counts during the morning and afternoon peak hours at the intersection of Cranberry Road and Yellowbrook Road, which is just to the west of this property. And from those traffic counts, we were able to get the peak hour traffic volumes passing the site frontage on Cranberry Road. We expanded the peak hour traffic counts that we conducted to a design year for the project, assuming that the project could be built in, I think it was 2 years. And we looked at phase 1 and phase 2 collectively. I looked at a worst case scenario where both of the buildings would be occupied by a specialty trade contractor. You've heard Mr. Walsh testify as to how many employees he has and what traffic he anticipates will come to and from the site for phase 1. We actually looked, like I said, at phase 1 and phase 2. We looked at the entirety of the project, a little bit less than 16,000 square feet of specialty trade space. The Institute of Transportation Engineers does have a category for that land use, and we projected a total of 27 driveway movements during the morning peak hour, 31 driveway movements during the afternoon peak hour. Of course, that's well in excess of what Mr. Walsh testified to with respect to phase 1, but I just wanted to give the board a comfort level that we did look at phase 1 and phase 2. We calculated the level of service at the site driveway to Cranberry Road As anybody who is familiar with the property and what's going on out there, it's mostly industrial properties in the area. There is a rear entrance to the westerly Equestra tract to Cranberry Road, but the traffic volumes are fairly light out on Cranberry Road, and the projected level of service for both the morning and afternoon peak hour for traffic exiting from the site to Cranberry Road is level of service A, which is the highest or best attainable level of service. And what that really indicates is that traffic will be able to enter and exit the site with minimal delay should it be approved. And outside of that, I'm sure Pat Ward, our engineer, will be able to answer and to testify on the internal circulation. You've heard Mr. Walsh testify as to what kind of trucks he thinks are going to use the site primarily. The site has been designed to accommodate those trucks, but I'm sure, like I said, our engineer, Pat Ward, can answer any specific questions on the site layout and the parking.
Perfect. I have no further questions of Mr. Ray.
Okay. Anybody from the board? No. Professionals?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
No
What I'll do,
questions.
just in the sake of time, I'm going to open up this to the public for any questions. What's that? For the witness. For this witness only. I'm sorry. All right, seeing none. Oh, yeah, come on up. This is just for traffic.
Okay, please state and spell your name for the record.
I'm sorry, maybe then it's not.
Yeah, this is just for traffic questions only.
Okay, I'm just concerned about noise ordinance.
Yeah, this is
No,
not,
just
yep.
come back.
You'll definitely have your time. Traffic only, yep, come on up. I'll save Mr. Cucchiero's voice for him. Just please state your name for the record
My name is Gregory Petrusco,
and your address.
20 East Milan Boulevard in Farmingdale. I live in Equestra.
Okay.
Can you just spell your last name for me, please?
Petrusko. So I'd just like to ask Mr. Ray this. Now, I know we're talking about only Phase 1 approval, but Phase 2 is going to come up. Mr. Walsh says he does not know at this point what type of trade contractor will go in there. Mr. Ray has done his study. I don't know, there could be a contractor in there that might.
My understanding is
50 vehicles.
right, my understanding is that what we just went over, and that's why we took a recess, is that Mr. Walsh would be taking Phase 2, using it for his business.
Correct.
That's how why we took a recess and read over everything.
So
with
the planning board
professionals.
is only going to accept Mr. Walsh using that for his business only?
Correct, and if he
Yes.
if he decides to have another
gonna come
trade
back.
contractor come in that is not his business, they have to come back to this board to get approval.
Okay, thank you
And then
very
the
much.
public gets an opportunity to weigh in on that particular instance.
Okay, that is a concern. If Mr. Walsh's business grows quite a bit, he could have a lot more vehicles in there too. So, I mean, these are the kind of things you got to think about.
Sure.
Absolutely.
And
And Ray, I think
if
you,
Mr. Ray has taken that into consideration for his study.
I did. I looked at Phase 2, as I indicated. I took the total square footage of the two buildings, which is just a little bit less than 16,000 square feet. And as I said, the ITE does have a land use code for specialty trade contractor, so I assumed that the whole site would be built out when I did my analysis.
Okay.
But I think the board certainly has that comfort level of if Mr. Walsh isn't going to take the second building, he's going to have to come back and give some specifics to the board with respect to who that user is and get an approval for that if he's not going to take the building.
So, Mr. Ray, let me ask you a question. When you do your study and you did peak usage and morning peak usage in the afternoon, does that take into consideration traffic flowing up and down Cranberry Road and traffic flowing in and out of, say, Equestra?
Yes.
It does.
Yes. And the counts were done in September of 2023 when schools were open, weather conditions were good. There weren't any incidents or detours or anything that would affect normal routine peak hour traffic flow.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public portion. And
Thank
Mr.
you.
Ray? Yeah,
Thank you for
we'll let you get out of
my
here.
time, Ralph.
You got it.
Anybody want to come to Ocean Township with me? Thank you.
Thanks.
John.
No, thanks.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman, for indulging us on that.
Sure.
All right, my next witness is Pat Ward. He is our engineering expert, and he's going to put a little more meat on the bone about the proposal.
Swear or affirm the testimony you're about to provide this board is the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth.
I do.
You state and spell your name for the record.
Sure. Patrick Ward, W-A-R-D, with Insight Engineering.
Okay, Mr. Ward, if you could provide the board with your qualifications.
I've been a licensed engineer for over 10 years. I'll qualify myself as a planner as well. I've been a professional planner by examination for 8 years. Both licenses are current and valid. I have appeared in both capacities in front of this board and the Township Zoning Board, and throughout Monmouth County and elsewhere in both capacities.
No, we're going to need a little bit more of that now. You're good, you're good.
I don't have John's resume. Thank you.
Soon enough, right?
Hopefully not soon enough.
Okay. So you want the aerial first?
Yeah, if we could start with the aerial, I just have the list.
Laura, if you can.
Where's my?
Existing conditions one?
Yes, please.
A21.
21.
Okay. Pat, if you could talk the board through the existing conditions and give them some information regarding the property.
Yeah, so you did a good job of obviously identifying the property, and I don't have to go through that again, but just to kind of cite things, Mr. Ray mentioned Yellowbrook Road, it's off to our west. What you could see here is a relatively recent aerial. I believe this was taken in September of 2023 of the property, right? So within the last 6 months. You see our property outlined in orange there, and our property today is vacant. No structures on the property. There is a remains of a driveway. Well, I wouldn't call it remains. It's a driveway that has no home associated with it. In my review of aerials, probably about 15 plus years ago, there appeared to be a house because there was a pool, but there was some sort of house, pool, and some activity going on in the rear. All those structures have been removed. Right now, the property is fenced in with an 8-foot chain link fence. As Mike had stated, this is owned by George Harms Construction at the moment, so it is fenced in for safety and security reasons. What you can see to our north and to our east, immediate, is the George Harms Construction yard. This is that southeast corner of the yard, and this is their accessory or ancillary access point on Cranberry Road. You can see that's gated. You can see that they have a lot of equipment stored on the driveway side. Off page to the north is more storage, and they have a couple of accessory buildings immediately to our north. Off to the west, you can see that kind of central to the property there is a single-family home. It is the west of us is zoned the same way, SCD1, but it is with the buffers, which I'll get into. The township ordinance leans on the use and the zoning. So the use here is single-family. In the back, there is some construction activity, but ultimately we looked with the board professionals at the tax records, and it is taxed and currently used as residential. So with that, I just want to give the board some flavor as to what's immediately surrounding us. To the south and to the southeast, south is a vacant parcel with, appears to be some environmental constraints. Immediately to the southeast is a mixed tenant kind of commercial use, and then off to the southeast is another paver use. And then the equestrian development that has been raised a couple of times is about 200 feet away to our east, across that George Harms Construction access. So just for some idea of where it is. And what you can see is the trees that continue off to the east. That if the board members ever had a chance to look at the file map of the equestrian development, there's the individual lots throughout that development. There's a lot of them, we know that. There's also, with that development, how it was approved, there's a conservation restriction around the perimeter. So there's a whole wooded area that can't be touched or developed that surrounds basically the perimeter of that property. So between us and any real call sensitive receptors, we have arguably more impactful uses, but also we have some distance and some vegetation that can't be touched. So I want to give the board some flavor of the existing conditions. What you could see here, the site is partially wooded, I would say. There's a good canopy on a portion of the site, and then there's some isolated individual trees kind of scattered throughout where there isn't a canopy. If we can go to the Phase 1 plan, please.
I think that's A19.
A19. So what get into is just overall, which you've seen on the screen. We're proposing 2 buildings on site. They will be phased. The site will be cleared to achieve this proposal. Building A is at the front, which is, you can see here on phase 1, is 5,180 square feet and will house Mr. Walsh's business. The architect will get into the exact layout, but we have portions of office space and that rear fitting space as Mr. Walsh qualified it. Phase 2 will contain Building B, which is just under 11,000 square feet, and it'll be in this yard area that you see as part of phase 1. So just to get into I'll get into the phasing in a moment. I just want to go through kind of the site layout and how we arrived at what you see in front of you. So access to the site will be by a single driveway on the east side of the frontage, so a single point of access from Cranberry Road. And the reason for that, it just kind of played well with access to the rear yard. What you could see all along the left side, which is west, is a row of a variety of plantings. That's the 50-foot residential buffer to our west. So what we're proposing there is a scattering of plant species. And again, we'll be happy to work with Sherry on the exact particulars of that as a condition of any approval. But we also have bermed that up as required by the ordinance too. So to provide that permanent separation to our west, visually and hopefully with noise. We're providing, for Building A, we're providing off-street parking in front of the building, immediately in front of the front doors, and off to its east, on its east side. Proper circulation is provided around and through Building A. So what Mr. Walsh, plans on utilizing that building for, this is designed really for him. He has trucks, work trucks and trailers that will have to pull into that building to either pick up, drop off, or do something with the fittings and circulate around and out. So we're not going to have any jockeying vehicles. The point is to go into the garage, clear straight through, and loop around. That's the circulation I mentioned. We have a trash enclosure located at the northeast corner of Building A. This location has changed since the initial design and submission that we made to the board. And with the board planner's comments in mind, previously we had the gates of it facing Cranberry Road. It was way more visible than it is here. We rotated it and partially tucked it behind the front building to limit visibility from the street. And further, and we're a little zoomed out, but on the landscape plan, you can see that there are evergreen trees around the west and north sides of that trash enclosure.
And that trash enclosure, that's enclosed and fenced also?
Masonry trash enclosure will have a gate, gate/fence on the front to hide the receptacles. So the main drive continues north, and the rear yard is going to be gated and fenced in. That gate will have a Knox box for access for emergency vehicles, and we have this rear storage area, which we're proposing as gravel in phase 1. The material storage bins Mr. Walsh mentioned are proposed at the very rear of the property, and he explained what the contents of those are anticipated to be. And again, I've said this a couple times, I'm sorry, but the rear yard will be completely fenced in for privacy, safety, and security for the business. On phase 1 and on phase 2, we have 2 stormwater surface basins. We have one at the front, and we have one about halfway into the back of the property. And a septic system, and I'll get into utilities in a moment, but we do have a septic system located just to the east of the main driveway. And I'll describe that in more detail in a moment. So for phasing, as I mentioned, we're intending to construct this in 2 phases. Phase 1 includes what you see here, all site improvements, the clearing, full extent of clearing, basically everything except the Building B, and some pavement around it. So we'll have all the site access, we'll have Building A, we'll have Building A's pavement and parking areas, the refuse will be built, the fully gravel rear storage yard, all fenced in. All lighting, save for the building-mounted lights that are proposed on Building B, will be proposed as part of phase 1. So what does that mean? Is we have perimeter pole lights around that yard. And again, I have more to say about lighting in a moment.
And those lights will be installed as part of phase 1. And we're not waiting for phase 2 to put those in.
No, the only lights part of phase 2 is what's going to be on the walls of the Building B. The utilities for phase 2 and for Building B.
Well, could we just go back to
Yes.
that then? So if they're all building mounted fixtures for phase 2, so how is that rear area lit?
There are perimeter pole mounts around the perimeter of that yard, in addition to the building mounts on Building B. And I have more to say about lighting, Ms. Newman, but yes, that's a fair question. Previously, that wasn't the case. Now it is the case.
run your lighting calcs for phase one?
We don't have, and that's something that the board engineer, Ms. Newman, and her office raised. We're happy to show, I think there's a little more, because of the phasing and the uniqueness of it, there's more depth to the lighting that we can do in terms of separating asphalt areas to gravel and other storage areas, and then also take a step further, Mr. Tannenhouse, is to do a phase one strict analysis and then phase two. Right now, our plans only are for phase two.
And Ms. Newman, would you have any concerns if phase one's lighting in the rear part doesn't provide a favorable lighting layout to be able to safely navigate, say, the center of that storage area?
Would I be okay with that?
I'm just asking, is that a concern that we as a board should be considering?
I think so.
Because that's a long distance for the perimeter lighting to light the center of that rear space.
And that's why we had that question posed in our report. I mean, I think the area should be lit appropriately.
Thank you.
And understanding the comments, I mean, I'll describe the lighting more specifically in a moment. I just want to finish the phasing portion of this. Just to, so I left off with the lighting. The utilities for the phase two building B will be stubbed out on site, so they'll be brought beyond building A to the rear, and future stubs will be provided for future connections. As you can see, the landscaping and the required buffer on the west side of the property from the full west property line will be proposed as part of phase one. So, and then phase two will simply be adding building B, modifying the rear basin to accommodate that building B, and then the pavement perimeter. We'll connect the utilities to building B, and then those additional wall pack lights will be provided on the building once it's constructed.
And what's the purpose of modifying the basin for building B? Will you still meet your stormwater retention requirements?
That would be the goal, yes. The reason the pavement's proposed is because we have a permeable pavement system with an underdrain to provide some storage. So we're taking storage out from the surface and putting it underground.
So, just so I can understand it, I'm sorry, I don't mean to stop you.
No worries.
No.
So, in phase two, the impervious pavement will be the way that we drain the water down, but the gravel and everything else that's been there for years will be highly compacted. So does that mean you're going to have to pull all that gravel up? Ms. Newman, I'm sorry. I got to ask you a question. Stormwater management is not my forte, but I think I grasp the concept of it. You want to have a porous soil so that the water can drain down.
That's correct.
And if we have storage in the back, God knows for how long, that ground's going to get super compact. How do we then put phase two up with impervious pavement? Does that mean they're going to have to literally dig down until they find an appropriate soil that will let the water drain and then put everything back?
Yeah, so in theory, you're correct. So as it's gravel, and that's why now the DEP recognizes gravel as an impervious surface, that's going to get compacted down. In order to do the permeable pavement, there's a cross-section and a depth that's going to have to be met, and they have to have the requisite subsoil conditions to suit that. But more or less, it's almost like putting in a whole pavement section. It's pretty deep that has to be excavated to be put back in.
Let me ask you another hypothetical question here. Let's say that by the time they go ahead and build phase two, state stormwater regulations change. What do we do then? Is this application with phase two approved lock them into today's, or are they going to have to meet tomorrow's stormwater regulations?
So here's what happens. They would be vested by way of their approval. But just similar to the extension that you heard, in the event that there is an ordinance change and they're outside of that vested period or there was a zoning, they would be subject to that. So they'd have should the board act favorably, they'd have their approval. They'd be entitled to come back and get extensions of that approval. But beyond that, they would be subject to any ordinance changes, including stormwater.
And I concur with that.
Thank you for the clarification.
And Mr. Tannenhouse, the pavement section, which, to echo what Ms. Newman said, is far deeper than the gravel section of phase one. So there will be over excavation required regardless. just to achieve what's currently designed.
And
But
there's
that's
an
a great
under drain
question.
component with that, correct?
There
So
is.
there'll be perforated pipe, stone wrapped in geotextile, all that type of stuff.
Right,
underneath.
right. So
Okay.
we're taking the storage and putting it under the pavement. That's why it's proposed. But yes, that's a great question. So utilities for the overall development, we have an existing 16-inch water main in Cranberry Road. We'll be connecting water service to that, including any connection for on-site hydrants as requested by the fire official of the township. Electric service will be fed off an existing utility pole right on the frontage on our side of Cranberry Road. Gas will be fed off the gas main in Cranberry Road as well. We don't have available sewer directly in front of our site. Coincidentally, there's some sewer off to the east, a couple 100 feet down. We explored that very early on, whether we can provide a connection there by gravity. It doesn't work. The sewer is awfully shallow in that manhole. So what we're proposing is an on-site septic system. There was a question raised in the CME memo, I believe, about do we need a second septic system for the rear building? Septic system is preliminarily sized on this plan to accommodate the extent of the development. So both buildings could connect. There's nothing that precludes that in the code from both buildings tying into the same tanks and disposal field. So that's what you see here. We don't have Board of Health approval yet. We would seek that as a condition of approval and final design. But we're confident that this is generally the size of the septic system disposal field that'll be required. Tanks to be located and to be sized.
What do you anticipate the septic field is going to look like to meet the board's approval? Because I saw the last report, it seemed like you had pretty high water table. Does that mean a giant mound above it?
Great question, something we talked about internally. The site today is being filled in the front to accommodate drainage and stormwater management. So with that,
How much is it being filled?
it depends on where you're pointing to, but it could be anywhere from half a foot to 2 feet in certain areas, right? We're not, nothing exorbitant, but to your point, if it needs to be some sort of mound. But if the remainder of the area around the mound is also being mounded, we'll say, it will be relatively flush with grade. So it'll look like an area of lawn. Of course, there's inspection ports associated with it.
So could you are you able to put a height to it? Are you able to?
At this point in time, no, but here's the challenge of trying to preliminarily design that with everything else is we've already looked at the grades that are currently proposed on that plan in the area disposal field, and we're confident that those grades will be reasonably close. And I will say that reasonably close within a foot. I know that's kind of a lot, but it's, yeah. Your conventional mounded system at a residential sticks out of the lawn like a sore thumb sometimes.
It's not going to be a 4-foot mound.
Yeah, we're mounding up everything around it as well.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think the mound's going to be a big deal. I just wanted to get an idea on the record
Sure.
of what you thought it may end up being. And if it was going to be pretty high, I didn't know if it was going to impede any ability to exit the site appropriately and see a sight line going east.
No, that's a very fair question.
So do you have an answer to that?
To the site?
Is the answer yes?
Like
or the
visual,
answer-
obstruction of vehicles? No, in effect, it's at grade.
Okay.
Yeah, no, there's no significant amount that will impact sight lines. In my opinion, it won't be visually obstructive at all.
Thank you.
And also from that letter from Monmouth County, it mentioned the boring logs. Has that investigation been carried out yet, or is that still forthcoming? Because they said they still needed that information.
So we've done several test pits throughout the property, and that's shown on our plans. They haven't been witnessed by the Board of Health because we're not at that point yet, but the same series of test pits, although a slightly different test will be done it has to be. That'll be one of our first steps if we're approved as a condition of approval, yeah. So no, the Board of Health has not witnessed. Okay, so let's get kind of a great segue into the grading and stormwater of the property. So the site generally today drains from the northeast corner to Cranberry Road. We're proposing to more or less maintain that natural drainage pattern on site and attenuate runoff at the lowest point of the property, which is at the front. So in an ideal world, we'd like to focus our stormwater management infrastructure at the lower ends of developments and properties. Coincidentally here, the soil characteristics at the front of the property are most favorable for stormwater management. So we have better groundwater depth and better permeability there. The further back in the property you go, really halfway back and then all the way to the rear, the permeability really diminishes greatly to the point where there's really no infiltration capability at the very, very rear of the property. Groundwater also becomes more and more limiting. So as you can see, we're proposing the 2 surface basins you see on the exhibits for both phases. So there were comments in the board engineer memo regarding stormwater management, and at the time of this hearing, we're here in front of the board. The comments have not obviously been addressed because the review letter was issued within the last week, which is fair. We intend on meeting with the board engineer's office and potentially the township engineer to review some of these comments and ensure that we have the design that's satisfactory to all the parties involved, township, board, and obviously the applicant's part of that. But something I spoke with CME about over this past week, and we have some meeting to do with them and kind of discuss these comments and seek a resolution to their satisfaction.
So, and Mr. Chairman, just to be fair on the comment about the review letter just coming out, they submitted February 2nd, and our review letters dated February 9th.
Yeah.
So there was no delay on our part in getting a review letter out.
Oh, that wasn't intended to say that, Ms. Newman. Sorry. Okay. And I'll go into parking. So for the trade contractor use, the demand for parking is broken up by internal uses in the building and how many fleet vehicles are needed for the project. That's how the zoning ordinance is written. In our case, based on the proposed floor plans, we require 10.4 spaces for the building areas and 2.6 spaces for what is like the fitting areas or the fit-out areas, the open spaces of the building. So this is a total of 13 spaces, and we're providing 13 within the front pavement area. Further, we're providing an EV make-ready space in the front of the building as required. For the fleet vehicles, the applicant was looking towards the future and seeking approval for space for 16 fleet vehicles. We anticipate these spaces will be utilized by work trucks, so we have room in the rear yard noted for 16 spaces sized at 10 by 30. For loading, this type of use doesn't have a practical need for your classic loading zone or loading dock up against either building, as Mr. Walsh kind of hit loading very lightly in his testimony. If delivery of any material or fitting or any other device was to occur, we anticipate the delivery vehicle would enter the property, likely head to the rear yard, stop off to the side, unload as necessary, and then traverse around to leave the site. Therefore, we indicate a typical area for loading in the rear that's separate from Building B in Phase 2. We did that for demonstration purposes to show that the board and its professionals how the size of a minimum loading space compares with the rear yard pavement area. So we have that tucked off to the right, the east side right there, and that's at 10 by 60, which is the requirement in the ordinance for loading. Refuse, I mentioned this before, we have the refuse enclosure behind Building A that'll serve both buildings. Now for lighting, we're proposing to appropriately light all pavement areas in the front to provide safety and security on site. So at the front half of the property, the entrance drive and areas around Building A are lit by a combination of pole-mounted and wall-pack lights. The maximum height of the light poles in the front half of the property is 18 feet. So in the rear, and I know there was some comment already about this, we're proposing perimeter pole-mounted fixtures around the yard. The height of those fixtures will be 22 feet. So in Phase 1 at this moment, we're proposing only the perimeter lights. So what it leaves is less lighting in the center of the yard than what the ordinance requires. We feel, and our opinion is, due to the nature of the use, which is a fully private gated yard in the rear, we feel this is still appropriate. Placing a pole in the middle, or poles in the middle of the storage yard, carries a collision risk that the applicant would prefer to avoid. We feel that the lighting design is more practical and still provides the perimeter lighting for safety and security. For Phase 2, those perimeter lights remain, and Building B will have additional wall-mounted fixtures intended to supplement what's already installed. So now when there's an actual physical improvement, like the building where sight lines could be impeded, we have now building lights on all sides.
I'm sorry, I got a comment on your comment about the lights in the center possibly causing an impact issue. If the lights in the center are going to cause an impact issue, when you build Phase 2, the whole building is going to be an impact issue. I'm sorry, I can't.
Mr. Tenenhouse, to your point,
I can't.
I'm looking at these plans. I need to understand, and I know we've got through operational, but this is a very vast storage area in Phase 1 when we look at this. And what we heard is most of the pipe goes to the site, but it's used for pipe, and I think those back bins for clean stone and DGA. I'm sure if we go to Shari, we're going to hear about the nature of the clearing on this site. But I'm trying to understand why we would go through all of this clearing and all of this area when we get to Phase 2, which in theory is the same business, their amount of storage is drastically reduced. So the intensity kind of goes up, but the need for that storage goes down. And I got to be honest with you, to gravel all of this area, and Mr. Tenenhouse, you brought this up before, to come back later to curb that and put in permeable pavement is also a pretty substantial amount of work. And so I think maybe we need to fully understand in better detail what is in this storage area and what's maneuvering back there, because if we need all that for Phase 1, you could see it right here. I mean, essentially the storage area goes to almost nothing.
Let me ask you this question. Did we pass an ordinance a couple years ago that requires, came up in one of our retail layouts, I think it's the one up by Woolies, where we had an ordinance change, I believe, that when someone has like a phased project, they don't clear that land until there's definite need for that second phase. Am I remembering that right? There's actually an ordinance on the books.
Well, no, I don't think it was an ordinance. I would defer to Sherry. I think we talked about when the payments were made.
Got it.
And that was in and along those lines.
That was just a condition of approval of that
But we have
project?
absolutely asked applicants to phase their clearing when needed. So I think that's something, and again, it wasn't on Mr. Ward's direct, but just as I'm listening to it and understanding the Phase 2 operation, I really think we need a solid handle on what the storage is in Phase 1 and how that's changing for Phase 2, because if we need less storage in Phase 1, as is represented in Phase 2, then I don't think the entire site should be cleared at this point. I think we should keep the area green, which honestly, to the applicant's need, would have less disturbance when they have to come back to rip everything out to do the permeable paving, building a building. So and I know it's kind of linked to the lighting and all of those kind of comments, but I just wanted to state that.
Sure. Interesting. And I see Sherry's nodding her head, so.
Do you want me to proceed?
Yeah, why don't you keep going, just give me a second.
We do, Mr. Tannenhouse, I do take your comments and Ms. Newman's comments about the lighting and the center poles, or if the rear yard in Phase 1, it looks like it does on our plans. Like I said, we're going to provide a Phase 1 specific lighting plan with the consideration of the board's comments regarding the extent of lighting in Phase 1. Landscaping, okay. With all the comments that were just raised. So where I'll start with is woodlands management. And again, as currently proposed, Phase 1, the site will be cleared as shown. As noted in the CME report and our plans, we cannot fully replace trees on site based on what's currently proposed. Therefore, any replacement trees that cannot be replaced must be converted into payment to the Township Tree Fund. We're happy to work with the board professionals, particularly Sherry, to ensure that our calculations are correct on the final plans, and again, to ensure that she's satisfied with, and the township therefore is satisfied with the species and the location of all the plants. We do provide the bermed landscape residential buffer to the west, as you can see on the plan. It's fully planted. We are proposing street trees across our frontage. They continue around the front basin towards the parking lot, as you can see. The front and rear of Building A will be planted with foundation plantings, and those have been supplemented with each revision as a result of board professional comments. And again, we're happy to work with the board professionals on species, spread, and location of the plantings. In terms of signage, we're proposing a single sign. It's towards the street to the west of the entrance drive. It's a monument sign that's intended to be fully compliant with the ordinance in terms of size and setback. So it'll be 3 feet by 12 feet on a base, and then the base of the sign will be landscaped with foundation plantings as required.
Will that sign be lit?
We anticipate that the sign will be lit with I believe it's a great question.
No,
I think it's going to be ground mounted.
All I wanted to know was it was lit.
It will be lit, yes.
Because I believe Cranberry Road is a pretty not very well lit, so having a lit sign where people can come by, say, 4 or 5 o'clock in the middle of winter makes
Yeah,
it easy
no,
for
we
them
do
to see.
anticipate
That's why
it'll
I
be
asked the
lit.
question.
And we'll specify the type of lighting. All right, Mike, that's my direct, and we can talk about the design waivers if you'd like.
Yeah, why don't we talk about the design waivers?
Okay.
And it's a static sign. We're not looking at any electronic signs or anything.
Static. Yeah, no, that's not the nature of this one.
There's no sound coming out of it.
Water mains, no, it'll be a standard static sign. Okay, so as noted in the CME review memo, there are a series of design waivers that we're seeking relief for, and I'll kind of go through each one. I'll paraphrase each design waiver and then kind of comment on each one. So the lighting intensity provided at ground level shall be a minimum of 0.3 foot candles anywhere, and shall average a maximum of 0.5 foot candles over the entire area, whereas neither has been met. So as I mentioned, this appears to be directed mainly at the rear storage yard. Due to the private nature of the use and being behind the locked gate, we feel the lighting is appropriate. And, you know, again, considering the comments of the board we've already heard this evening. Driveway widths exceeding 24 feet shall be approved by the planning board. We have, due to the types of vehicles and the nature of the use, we feel the 30-foot is an appropriate waiver request that we're proposing for driveway width. Areas of ingress and egress, loading and unloading, major interior driveways and aisles, and other areas to experience similar heavy traffic shall be paved with not less than 4 inches of compacted base course, and no more than 2 inches of, so the minimum 2-inch surface course is required as well. So this is pointed to the gravel in Phase 1 and portion of Phase 2, and the permeable pavement. We feel that the gravel is an appropriate base for Phase 1 and for a storage yard. The permeable pavement has a very significant base aggregate because of the storage it's required to provide. But we'd be happy to work with the board engineer to ensure the final pavement section details are acceptable in terms of permeable pavement. There's a surface course. We're proposing 3 feet. If it needs to be thicker, we'd be happy to do that, but we feel that what we're proposing now is acceptable for the type of use where those pavements will be.
Can we sustain the vehicular loading?
What we can do is we can explore that, Ms. Newman. I don't have the direct answer to that right now, but we can explore that with the project geotechnical engineer.
Okay.
I don't want to say yes or no at the moment. All areas between the parking and the building shall be landscaped, where no landscaping is proposed for Building B. It does note that we've revised the plans for foundation shrubs for proposed Building A, except where the building's access points are located. So Building B in Phase 2 is proposed to be 100% surrounded by pavement, and additionally, it's in the rear yard of the property, behind the front building, behind a landscape berm to the west. So the only other neighboring areas that would see this building and its lack of landscaping is the 2 sides of the property that face the George Harms yard. Loading spaces shall abut the building being served. We talked about this earlier. The nature of this use doesn't have a practical need for a conventional loading zone or dock. So loading and unloading can take place in a number of spaces, but we're showing a typical location for demonstration showing the minimum size loading space. The next one is all required replacement trees shall be planted on the site from which the trees were removed if possible. So we'd be seeking a waiver to submit the balance of what can't be replaced on site to the Township Tree Fund due to limited available planting area. And again, as you can see, we provide a lot of trees on the berm and buffer. We provide trees scattered throughout where green space is. We're happy to work with Sherry on pinning down the final number and where else, you know, if the board feels that there are additional areas where trees can be planted to offset that contribution, we'd be happy to do that. Loading and service areas shall be screened with buffers, walls, fencing, and landscaping. The trash enclosure is not entirely screened. So I do want to note here that we originally had the trash enclosure facing directly to Cranberry Road. Hearing the board planner's comments, we rotated it and slid most of it behind Building A. So the enclosure will have gates, keeping the receptacles out of view, which I think is what that specific ordinance requirement really wants. We'll also propose evergreen trees on the west and north sides of the enclosure. So in our opinion, the enclosure and its receptacles will not be visible to passing cars on Cranberry Road, nor to the residential use to our west.
Do you think you could just add to that one additional side?
Yes, without a doubt. Yep, that was, we were anticipating that, yeah. Thank you, Sherry.
So that was, so we
To
could
the
work,
east.
we could work with Shari to figure out putting some additional trees along the east side of the enclosure. I think
Yeah.
there's a little bit of space there.
Correct. All lots shall have a private walkway access to a public sidewalk in the right-of-way. We are not proposing sidewalks, and we're seeking a waiver from that requirement. Looking up and down Cranberry Road in this area, sidewalks don't exist on Cranberry Road, as you can kind of see on the aerial. So in lieu of providing same on property, the applicant will pay into the Township Sidewalk Trust Fund if approved by the board. Parking lots exposed to public view shall be surrounded by some sort of impervious screen, hedge, or wall. So this is pointed to the parking area along the east side, abutting 5.01, which is the east side. There is a chain link fence along that property line today, so what we'd offer to the board is that we can add privacy slats there. There is landscaping off property, trees, not even landscaping, I'm sorry, vegetation off property to the east. But we would supplement that with making that fence solid where those parking stalls are. In terms of the parking spaces facing the building, in front of the building, I want to kind of comment on that a little more. So again, they face the building, so headlight screening towards Cranberry Road doesn't seem to be as much of an issue as other typical sites where your parking lot is closer to the road. Those spaces are about 120 feet away from Cranberry Road's edge of pavement, and again face away. We're proposing a series of street trees and trees around the basin in an effort to provide shade and more greenery at the front of the property. Further, we're proposing the basin in the front yard area, and this will open up that front yard and forces the impactful improvements further to the rear. We haven't gotten a planning testimony in support of the basin in the front yard yet, but with any basin, there are components to the system that are necessary, like the emergency spillway, access point, basin access road, and in our case, we have curb scuppers and riprap aprons that accept the runoff into the basin. So all these reasons combined are why we don't have a continuous hedge or planting scheme around either side of the basin. If we did, these features would break it up and it would possibly appear disjointed and not continuous. The next one is along each street line, a 5-foot strip measured from the right-of-way shall be provided suitably landscaped, except for necessary walks and access ways. So similar to what I just said, we have an emergency spillway on the south side of that basin, and that's for emergency purposes only, and that is really between the street trees there. We're not supposed to plant those because in the event of emergency, we don't want any of that to be washed away, so that's meant to be green space, a green berm, we'll say. That's all I have, Mike.
Okay, I think you got most of the waivers. The only thing I think I had in here, and I may have missed it when I was talking to the applicant, there are railroad ties around the back portion of the property.
Yeah, it was noted that curbing is not provided. So phase one I'll start with, that we're proposing railroad tie or timber tie curbing around the gravel to provide a hard edge. That will be replaced with phase two because permeable pavement in the BMP manual requires concrete curb, flush concrete curb at a minimum or raised around the perimeter. So phase two will have concrete curb around that pavement, but we do provide the curb to provide a hard edge on all of the pavement.
You have bollards, is there bollards for the head-on parking?
In front of the building?
Yes.
Yes.
And what are
that
the,
I'm used to.
And what are the depths and the grade from going into the basins?
Yes, it's a great question. So let me just. They're shallow. They're shallower than typical, Mr. Townhouse, but I'll give you the real numbers. So for the front basin, just bear with me one moment.
Take it over.
The front basin, the bottom is 85.2, and the spillway is 87, and then the top of berm is 88, so about 3 feet deep in the front. And then in the rear, or the middle, I should say, it's about 2.5 to 3 feet deep. So they're relatively shallow, considering there are deeper basins out there.
And I think you also had produced a turning movement plan.
Mm-hmm.
If you could just talk quickly about that so that the board is comfortable that trucks
Mr. Chair, before we move over to that, can we just go back to a couple ones that you had mentioned? 2J with the 5-foot strip. I get that you need that spillway area, but between the street trees that you have, you could provide, some sort of landscaping along the frontage.
Sherry, is your mic on?
Yeah. Do you want me to repeat it?
No, I got it.
Okay.
Feel better,
I
right?
can hardly.
Thanks for coming.
And I'm assuming you were looking for some type of shrub?
It could be shrub and ornamental grass, just something to have some sort of streetscape over there. Also, I'd like to, do a site meeting out there because I do think a lot of that buffer is good to keep and rather than take down and plant 5-foot trees. Including there might be a few oaks towards Cranberry Road that could be saved too, that's in the buffer area.
We'd be happy to meet on site. Yes, absolutely.
So, Mr. Chair, kind of as was indicated earlier, I believe, by Mr. Ward, he knows he has to meet with us relative to drainage. I would also suggest that this meeting with Shari occur also prior so that you have a realistic picture of that buffer. Again, I think we dealt with this similar on the Kometz application. You'll remember we wanted to make sure that Shari and Mr. Plaskanka on that one went out, met, so that we knew where this tree save area was going to be and what was going to be supplemented.
Okay, Pat, you're good with that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, we've done it in the past.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. Mike was able to discuss with the applicant about the lighting. Oh, Mr. Tannenhouse. Well, what we're open to, or the applicant, I should say, is open to, is to provide a fixture, a pole-mounted fixture or fixtures in the middle of that Phase 1 yard area, where if there was a Phase 1 lighting plan, you would see that there is a dark spot in the center there. We'll provide that to provide an even spread throughout the yard.
Okay.
Again, we have to provide the board and its professionals the Phase 1 plan, so to demonstrate or the extent of relief still needed, if needed, for lighting.
Great.
I think you hit all of the things that I had for you. I don't know if the board had any questions for Mr. Ward or the board's professionals.
Does anybody have any questions for Pat?
What's the time frame between Phase 1 and Phase 2?
I don't have
The difference.
Yeah, I don't have an answer for that because, but I'll leave it to Mike to answer.
I mean, it's the answer is it depends. So there is no, right now, there is no, like, you have some developers who come in, and they'll say Phase 2 is going to happen in 4 years, Phase 3 is going to happen in whatever time. This is really contingent upon how his business is running. As you heard him say, his main goal really is to kind of get that number 1 building up, and if everything's going well, get that number 2 building up. And he wanted to come in and say, here's what both are going to look like to the board. I may not ever get to that Phase 2, but if I do, this is what it's going to look like.
I don't know if Mr. Ward's necessarily the right person to answer this or provide testimony to it, but I think what we're all struggling with over here is it seems to be such a disconnect in the application between Phase 1 and Phase 2. In Phase 1, there's so much more storage area. Phase 2, there's an additional building, but there's no additional fleet parking spaces. You did agree to tweak the lighting for Phase 1, but I think it's very difficult for us to understand kind of how the site as developed for Phase 1 will then kind of go to Phase 2 and what that'll look like and kind of why it'll happen with all the work involved.
I don't really have listen, as far as Phase 1, all right, Phase 1 is what you guys have proposed with the septic and your storage area. Everything looks pretty good, right? You need a few tweaks here.
John, we're just going to take a 5-minute recess.
All right?
All right, yeah.
Mr. Tannenhouse doesn't miss anything. We'll now reconvene.
Pat, can you, for Mr. Tannenhouse here,
Sorry. Wouldn't be the first time.
the lighting again, if you wouldn't
Yeah,
mind?
so, and this is obviously subject to an actual design and analysis. The applicant is willing to put light fixtures in the center of that rear yard to provide an even spread. So right now, the concern is the perimeter is lit appropriately, in the middle it's a dark spot. The goal is to eliminate that dark spot. And it's subject to, obviously, a design and then submission to the board professionals for their review of it, and then, of course, the board members as well.
I'm assuming you'll have appropriate protection bollards and stuff around it so that
We'd
it
have
does
to.
get crash protection.
I would imagine we'd have a footing that's raised about 3 feet, and then possibly supplemental bollards, yep.
And you know, there are some questions on phase 1 and phase 2 and timing, and I'm hearing some hesitancy from the board professionals and from the board, and maybe to alleviate some of that, pardon me, some of that uncertainty, maybe we can actually change the application and make it preliminary and final for phase 1 and preliminary only for phase 2. We would have to come back for phase 2, just like we'd have to come back if there was a different tenant, or there would be a tenant going in there. We would have to come back to make our preliminary for phase 2 final. But we still obviously are providing all the testimony because we're asking for that preliminary approval for both, and then just preliminary and final for phase 1.
I think Ms. Newman.
So, yeah, I said that like 2 hours ago.
Yeah, right.
I think I am fully in favor of that. I understand the goal here. I just think that phase 2 just brings up a lot of questions, so I would feel much more comfortable in that position. I do still want to hear testimony, though, on the storage component, because if we can eliminate some of that clearing and reduce that area, I think that would also make sense under phase 1. But having heard the representation, I would fully support that.
I apologize, I'm a little slow on the uptake. Okay, so were there any other questions?
Any other questions, John?
Well, I think that's the next question, right?
Answers, I'm sorry, what question?
That is the next question is okay, what are we doing with the storage and the clearing, and is there a reduction in clearing based upon that we don't have a building there going today? I think that's...
Correct. They haven't answered that yet.
Sounded like they were getting to the finish line and skipping over that one.
And the other thing I want to note to the board, to be very clear, is I don't expect there to be a vote this evening, because they do still owe a site walk with Shari on the buffer, and they do still owe some additional information on the drainage. That would also give them time, Mr. Tannenhouse, to submit lighting after we kind of hear about the storage area, but you'd also have that information as well.
And also, maybe with your client, you revisit building 2, as far as, in the future, would it get approved if you broke it up into flex space? You know, would we approve it for that? You gonna have enough parking spaces for your potential, applicants, not applicants, renters, and, what are they bringing to the table? What kind of noise, what kind of hours of operation, okay? Is this septic system gonna, I know you could put another septic in the back someplace, is that gonna be suitable? Okay, there's a lot of questions for number 2, Maybe you guys should rethink this and get your we gotta revisit the site anyway, but work on phase 1, hopefully his business grows, and he could do to what he wants to do with I think with just his own business. I don't know if he should, come to us with that other idea, but that's his choice, and we could approve it or not approve it, but, I'm sure monetarily, if he's gonna clear his entire site and put all this money up, right, you wanna make sure
Yep.
business is going to be thriving for that, right?
Correct.
All right, so Mike, just so I'm clear here, so you're seeking preliminary and final on phase 1 and preliminary only on phase 2, because it's understood it's industry-driven if the success of the business, which we all hope it does well. Okay, just wanted that.
I'm sorry, yeah, that is correct.
Okay.
I didn't verbalize, I apologize.
So is that it for Pat as an engineer?
That's it for Pat as an engineer, unless the board had any other questions or professionals had questions.
I think, I mean, oh, okay.
I think we're still waiting to hear about the storage area.
Yeah, like.
Oh, yeah, Pat's not the one to answer.
Yeah, understood. So it's a different one. Yeah, I guess the way I'm going to do this, because we probably won't have a vote tonight, is to open it to the public just for engineering questions for Pat while he's here. So if anybody from the public, just for engineering questions, sir.
All right, just swear you in it. All right. In the testimony you're about to provide, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right. Please go up to the microphone. Just state and spell your name and give us your address.
Les Spindel, S-P-I-N-D-E-L, 46 West Da Vinci Way. Okay. One of the things when an industrial development is next to a residential development is the question of the issues of noise and other things like that. And one of the things which we definitely appreciate from all of you folks and the professionals is the requirement for a buffer between residential and industrial. In the December 8th engineers report, there was mention of that there was not a buffer being provided in this case to a property lot 2.01. Has that been fixed? And I just also like to say we really appreciate if you always enforce that buffer, because it helps. It's a compromise, and it helps with the noise issues. Doesn't make them go away, but it definitely makes it a lot better.
Yes, so to answer that, we have provided that full buffer on the west, so lot 2.01 is fully buffered from the development.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Yeah. All right, please, again, please state and spell your name and provide us your address.
Walter Mazur, M-A-Z-U-R, 176 West Renaissance Boulevard, Equestra resident. I'm going to build a little bit on Mr. Spindel's concern about noise. And some of my questions might be more for Mr. Walsh and Mr. Ward about the impact of that noise on Equestra residents in particular, such as during operations, backup alarms on any of their trucks, their dump trucks, their cars. Is there going to be any type of assembly required during the manufacturing of these pipes and pumps? In the past, we've heard loud banging sounds, somebody hammering on things, and it just seems to reverberate and echo through the west side of Equestra. You would think with all the trees there that it would muffle the sound a bit, but it does not. And during the daily operations, also, are there going to be any type of PA systems, loudspeakers? Somebody getting on a PA calling an employee from the back lot, hey, Joe, get to the front office, got a question for you. Any type of loud music played over a PA system. So just those type of general concerns, that as a resident of Equestra, we're living with some things, from some of the other businesses there that don't make it as pleasant as I thought it would be when I moved there 7 years ago. So looking to just alleviate some of those concerns. So if Mr. Walsh or Mr. Ward can answer any of those, I would appreciate it.
I can take, I'll do my best to try to hit it all. There are no speakers proposed. I think it's the applicant's position that we're not proposing any speakers. I understand what you're suggesting could be an issue. We're not proposing that. Mr. Walsh identified earlier what happens indoors in the front building and potentially in the rear building if that gets approved. And I'm not terribly familiar with all the fittings that he was mentioning, but the fitting assembly and all those components as part of his water main installation will happen indoors. And there are roll-up doors. I think it would be his position that those doors will remain closed when there's any assembly happening. Exterior to the building, I don't believe there will be any assembly. Connections of pipes to pipes, it usually happens in the field when you're laying a water main. So that'll happen at the job site, which is, wherever that may be in the state of New Jersey. In terms of just noise, though, overall, the township has very specific performance standards, and it's like noise, glare, light. There's a noise ordinance at the property line that really needs to be followed. Now, I know in practice that can be deviated, and you've probably experienced that at your home. I will say for our specific property, not to comment on any other properties, we are 200 feet away from the equestrial limits, and then there's a conservation easement beyond that. So
how many feet was that? I'm sorry.
The stem of the Harms property is 200 feet.
And
wide.
So our property is how many feet from equestrian?
200.
200.
Yeah. So we're 200 feet wide. You almost copy that over. It's the width of the Harms yard. And then you have the equestria conservation easement. And again, I understand your comments, sir. But our goal here is not to be a disruptor. And I don't believe we'll be your nearest disruptor either.
Is there any type of welding done on these pipes during that, at this site will be done?
No. I got that from Mr. Walsh.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none? Okay, we'll close the public portion, and next.
Perfect. Thanks, Pat.
All right, I'm going to Ocean.
In the testimony you're about to provide, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Yeah.
Okay. Could you just state your name for the record, and then give the board your qualifications?
My name's Amanda Lanuto.
Could you please speak in? We have to pick you up on that.
My name is Amanda Lanuto of Lanuto Architecture. My last name is spelled Lanuto. I'm the architect and one of the principals at Lanuto Architecture. I received a Bachelor's of Architecture from New Jersey Institute of Technology. I've been in the field of architecture for about 24 years and have been licensed for 16 years.
We will accept your credentials.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. So moving on. This is, just for the record, I think this was marked as A11. This is a color rendering of the front facade of the front building.
Yes.
Can you just walk the board through the design?
So the front building is a 5,100 square foot building with a 10 foot by 8 foot deep enclosed entrance vestibule. The building has a metal seam gable roof in a black or dark charcoal color, a belt course of a dark colored cultured stone or brick. The vertical metal seam siding is in a light gray color. The building's exterior also has many windows, doors, enlarged white composite vertical corner boards, composite horizontal front white band, awning projections, metal seam projected roof return eaves, shake siding at the front gable end of the entrance vestibule, and light fixtures to break up the elevations.
Perfect. Maybe if we can go to the next exhibit, which I think is A9. Yeah, sorry, it's the architectural layout for the front building. Oh, perfect, there you go. Okay, so if you could talk the board through this architectural.
Okay, of the 5,100 square foot is broken down into office and business use group area at the front left of the building with an area of about 1,241.5 square feet. Then there's a storage use group area at the back of the building with an area of about 3,625.5 square feet. Then there's a common area located at the front right of the building with an area of 306 square feet. The common area contains a kitchenette and restrooms that will be utilized by both the rear storage use group as well as the front business use group. The storage use group is calculated per the area to have an occupant load of 12 occupants. The business office use group is calculated per the floor area to have an occupant load of 13 occupants. And then we have also calculated an occupant load for the common area of 3 occupants to allow for any of the occupant load and the inclusion of possible visitors or maybe extra employees or of either the front or rear portion of the buildings.
Perfect. And just to go back, you said that the common area, so the bathrooms and the kitchenette, that is an area that's going to be used both by the trade contractor portion of the business and also by the office space.
Yes, it's similar to, say, like in an office building, they will usually have like a common core where they might have gang bathrooms, kitchen space that is used by multiple tenants, but in this case, it's more just the storage use group in the back and the business use group in the front.
Perfect. Thank you. If we can go to A12.
What is A12?
A12 is the color rendered facade for the rear building. Okay, if you could talk the board through this exhibit.
Okay. The real building is a 10,780 square foot building. The real building, like the front building, in order to create uniformity between the two buildings, also has the same metal seam gable roof, vertical metal seam siding in a light gray color, a belt course of a darker colored vertical siding at the lower portion to match the belt course at the front building. The building's exterior also has many windows, doors, and large white composite vertical corners, awning projections, metal seam projected roof eave returns, and light fixtures to break up the elevations. In addition to the above details, the rear building also contains faux 3-foot wide white composite columns to further break up the elevations and act as both form and function, since it all allows for a flat surface to better mount the exterior light fixtures and creates a visual break in color, texture, and building plane on the elevations.
Perfect. And so just to go back, so you would say that there are the white columns and they're there to break up the facade. How big are they?
They're 3-foot wide and they go from the eave at the top down to the top of the belt course.
Perfect. And they'll be white in color?
Yes.
Okay. And we have worked on this design, or you have worked on this design with the board planner.
Yes.
And you're willing to work with the board planner. Should there be any other comments to I guess, break up the facade a little bit more to whatever the board thinks would be the most aesthetically pleasing?
Yes.
And I'm sorry, not just aesthetically pleasing, and also in line with the township code.
Yes, with their architectural standards.
Right, with their architectural standards.
I will say this is one of the most aesthetically pleasing designs we've seen for buildings of this type. I think the applicant's architect really tried to incorporate the township's design standards when designing these buildings, so we don't really have any further comments on them.
Thank you. And then if we can go to the last slide, Laura, this is A10. It's the interior layout of the rear building. Okay, Amanda, if you could just talk the board through this exhibit.
All right. The real building is broken into 2 separate spaces for the trade businesses, which is, per the New Jersey IBC, is considered the storage use group occupancy. Each unit contains a potential office space with an attached restroom, and then an additional restroom for the storage use group space.
So, Counselor, with all due respect,
sure,
we're not even thinking about the second phase of this project. I'm not sure testimony of what's going on the inside is even warranted, because you have to come back once you figure out what you're going to do with it. Do you agree?
I agree. Amanda's going to be another 2.
It's your testimony, but
another minute to just run through the.
Kind of just to follow up on that, I would also think this layout would have to change, since you've provided earlier testimony that as of right now, you know, the rear building would only be used by the applicant. So I don't know if there would be the need for the two separate units in it.
There would need to be a potential firewall in the middle. We're trying to avoid sprinklers, so by breaking it into separate fire areas, we're able to avoid a sprinkler system for the building.
That may not be the best use of the building. And I think that's what goes to, you can put the testimony on the record, but if it was going to be one user, maybe it has to be designed with a suppression system. So.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, if this ends up in the record, then I'm a definite no. Because this just automatically opens up the door for a possible two-tenant situation back there. We just spent a half hour of the board's time trying to figure out that we're not going to have that. And I'm sorry, I don't want to waste my time anymore here. Either this is a two-tenant scenario and we go back to the fact that we're not compliant with this application, or we have something else. I'm sorry, but this is, I'm not buying it. And I'm agitated. And I don't get agitated very often.
Okay. Then we will stop with Amanda's testimony. As I said, what we were trying to do is just put the testimony on the record, since this is preliminary for phase 2 and preliminary and final for phase 1. If the board doesn't have any, does the board have any questions of Mr.
Anybody?
I have a question.
Sure,
yeah.
Mike.
In reviewing the letter from Leon Avakian, there was a new comment on there regarding the kitchenette and 30% office use and a potential D3 variance, which would kick it over to the zoning board. Has that been resolved? Because that would speak to where you're coming back to next.
I believe the applicant provided testimony to that. And the architect also did that. It would be used for both the office people and the field people. So it doesn't trigger that 30%.
Gotcha. Sorry, I missed that. Thank you.
Anybody else? Seeing none? All right. In the spirit of time, I think we'll just go to your next. Are you bringing Pat back, or?
Well, probably.
I think I'm going to wait till the end, in the spirit of time. Is she going to stick around?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. All right, so what I think I would like to do, if the board's okay with it, is I would like to pause the hearing for tonight before putting Pat's testimony on, because there were changes in the plan.
Understood.
To change it from a preliminary final for phase 1 and the preliminary just for phase 2. I would like him, in case there are certain changes that need to happen from a planning perspective, I'd like to have his testimony be full.
Understood.
Rather than him coming and give something that's disjointed.
So what I'll do, Mike, with the public that is here, I will open it up to them for architectural questions, if you don't mind. So if anyone just has questions for the architect while she's still here, please step forward. Seeing none, I'll close the public portion. Okay, so Eileen, I guess we're looking for another date here. Yeah.
That's all, yeah.
Mike will take care of that.
Yeah, not a problem.
We're getting into springtime. It's a good thing.
I have April 4th, which just right now has a minor subdivision on it. I have April 18th, which has a site plan application already scheduled. May 9th with nothing.
What's the second one in April, Eileen?
What's the second date?
No, what's the second application for the second date in April?
It's 271 Adelphia LLC.
Got it. Okay.
If you could move us to the 18th.
18th of April?
Yes.
And I'll need an extension of time?
You got it. I'll give you Do you want a formal letter or an email?
You can just put it on the record tonight.
Okay. You have your extension until to the end of the month, so April, I don't, is it April 31st or April 30th?
30 days has September,
There you
April.
go.
All right.
All right, I'll make the announcement then. So the application of JABE Howell LLC, that's SP 1115, will be carried to the board's April 18th regularly scheduled meeting at 7 p.m. in this meeting room. All documents are still available in Town Hall during regular business hours for the public view.
Okay. Mike, Pat, thanks.
Thank you.
All right.
Appreciate
Have
it.
a great night.
Thank you, have a good one.
Is there any master plan updates? Not to put you on the spot.
Sorry, no master plan updates at this
Okay,
time.
thank you. And is there any executive session?
No,
Okay,
Mr. Chairman.
thank you. All right, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
So be.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you, buddy. Thank you.